Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're literally popping the hood on the macroeconomic engine that drives, well, our entire global society. We're going to explore a massive, century-old debate that dictates how countries manage their wealth, how they handle crises, and ultimately how your own paycheck behaves. We're going to unravel the secrets behind aggregate demand, aggregate supply, and this incredibly fascinating concept known as sticky wages. Okay, let's dive into this and start with basically the most fundamental hook question in all of macroeconomics. When the economy crashes, should the government step in or step aside? Seriously, this single question is the absolute battleground for the greatest clash of economic worldviews in history. How you answer this essentially decides whether you think free markets are perfect, self-healing machines, or if they're flawed engines that sometimes, need a heavy bureaucratic tow truck to get moving again.
Here is our roadmap for today. We're going to start with supply, demand, and the economy. Then we'll visit the classical economic system, followed immediately by the Keynesian critique. After that, we'll uncover the problem of sticky wages, and finally, we'll synthesize this whole shebang by comparing the short run versus the long run.
All right, Section 1, Supply, Demand, and the Economy. Let's set up the playing field. It all starts right here with aggregate demand, or AD for short. Now, this isn't just a demand for, say, coffee at your local cafe, or the demand for steel in the auto industry. No, this is looking at the entire country. Aggregate demand is the absolute total demand for all final goods and services in a given economy, at a given time, and at a given price level. It's literally the sum total of every single purchase happening within a nation's borders.
And all of that builds into a really simple, beautiful equation. AD equals C plus I plus G plus X minus M. So total demand is made up of consumer spending, business investments, government spending, and net exports. Changes in absolutely any of these pieces will shift total demand for the whole country. For instance, if people expect inflation to just spike tomorrow, well, consumers will rush to buy things today, right? That shoots the C component up and shifts aggregate demand across the entire economy.
Moving on to Section 2, the classical economic system. Let's travel back in time a bit.
So the entire classical mindset can pretty much be summed up by Say's law, named after the economist Jean-Baptiste Say. It states, very simply, supply creates its own demand. Building on Adam Smith's famous idea of the invisible hand, classical economists believed that the very act of producing goods actually generates the exact amount of income needed for society to buy those goods. Think about it for a second. A factory makes a car, right? But it also pays workers, it buys steel, it pays out profits. That income then cycles right back into the economy as demand.
So the crucial point is that classical economists operate under the core belief that free markets are entirely self-regulating. Because they believe prices and wages are highly flexible, any problem is just seen as a temporary blip. If there's high unemployment, wages naturally drop until it's cheap enough for businesses to hire everyone back. Therefore, the economy naturally hums along at full employment without any need for government intervention whatsoever. It is a beautifully neat, completely self-contained system.
Which brings us to Section 3, the Keynesian critique. Well, history has a funny way of ruining beautifully neat systems. For over a century, Adam Smith's classical view reigned supreme. Then, the 1930s hit. The Great Depression brought massive, devastating unemployment that simply wasn't fixing itself. The invisible hand suddenly seemed broken. In 1936, British economist John Maynard Keynes realized Say's law just wasn't working. Supply wasn't creating demand. People were terrified, they were hoarding their pennies, and total spending had completely collapsed. Keynes argued that demand can absolutely fall short of supply, breaking that whole self-correcting machine. And this created a stark, massive divide in economic thought. On the left side, the classical view relied heavily on self-regulating markets and flexible prices. But on the right side, the Keynesian view countered that the economy actually requires active government intervention. Keynes basically argued that, during a massive downturn, if consumers and businesses are too scared to spend, the government literally must step in and spend to artificially prop up that aggregate demand. Otherwise, the economy just stays stuck in the mud. Section 4. The problem of sticky wages. Let's talk about why things get stuck in the mud.
So why did Keynes think the economy gets stuck? He observed something incredibly important about human nature. Wages are sticky. Specifically, they are sticky downward. Now, the classical model just assumed that if a recession hits, wages smoothly drop so everyone keeps their jobs, just at a lower pay rate. But let's be real, in the real world, human wages resist adjusting quickly. When economic conditions crash, the price of a TV in a store might drop, but an employee's salary does not easily fall.
So why is this? Just remember the acronym CLAMS. First, contracts. You likely sign a yearly salary agreement, right? Your boss can't just randomly cut your pay on a Tuesday. Next, legal minimums, like the minimum wage, put a hard floor on pay. Then there's allocation efficiency and morale. Actually, these two go hand in hand. Employers know that cutting pay absolutely destroys motivation. It leads to worse performance and causes their top talent to quit. Finally, settlement costs. It is administratively super expensive to renegotiate everyone's pay. Because of all these factors, wages stay stuck, leading to layoffs instead of pay cuts. Finally, Section 5, short run versus long run, how we bring it all together. So how do modern economists resolve this massive fight? They define the short run as the period where wages and some prices remain stuck. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the chain reaction it shows. Imagine an economy-wide inflation event where prices jump 20%. A car producer instantly raises the price of their cars by 20%. But here is the secret. Their workers' wages and their long-term steel contracts are sticky. They don't change right away. Suddenly, the producer is making a massive profit margin because their costs are stuck, but their sale prices are way up. They are highly motivated to hire more people and pump out more cars. And that is exactly why the short-run aggregate supply curve slopes upward. Because of those stuck input costs, combined with the rising sale prices, profit margins just expand massively. That intense short-run incentive to produce more is what actually drives the economy in the near term. The sticky wages basically create a temporary illusion of massive profitability across the board.
But, eventually the party ends. Enter the long run. Economists define the long run not as a specific number of years, but as a hypothetical period where all prices and all wages finally unstick. Contracts expire, negotiations happen. In the long run, if car prices went up 20%, you better believe those workers are going to demand 20% more pay, and the steel suppliers are going to charge 20% more. Because all costs catch up in the long run, the producer's initial profit motive completely evaporates. And that is why the long-run aggregate supply curve is plotted as completely vertical. It sits firmly at YP, potential output, or full employment. In the long run, regardless of whether prices are 20% higher or 50% lower, once wages adjust to match, the economy settles right back down to its natural rate of production. The only things that can shift this vertical anchor are real physical changes to the economy, like new technology, better productivity, or discovering more natural resources. And this brilliantly illustrates the grand compromise of modern macroeconomics. The Keynesians are absolutely right about the short run. Wages are sticky, the supply curve is upward sloping, and demand shocks can cause real, painful recessions. But the classical economists are right about the long run. Eventually, wages become fully flexible, the supply curve is vertical, and the economy self-corrects to its natural potential.
So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a thought that connects this century-old theory right to your own wallet. If your wages are stuck by a yearly contract while the price of your groceries and gas rises today, who is really bearing the costs of the short run? Thank you so much for joining me today. Keep asking questions, keep looking at the data, and start viewing your own paycheck through the fascinating lens of macroeconomic theory. Until next time.